Hey everyone, start of another weekend. It seems like every week is the biggest week in this part of the world, in the Middle East, and everything that we've been talking about. Now, let me make a comment before we get into the subject of this video, why I look unkempt, why I've been unshaven. Many of you know, some of you don't know, and I've had some comments in a number of the videos over the last week about my appearance. So for those who are unaware, we are in a period of time right now on the Jewish calendar where we are mourning the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple from 2,000 years ago, when the Romans in the year 70 laid siege to Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and we're in that period of mourning. This is the time period when it happened, and therefore there are a variety of customs, and many Jews have the custom to not shave during this period of time as part of our sign of sadness and mournfulness, not to shave, not to take haircuts, and many other things. That's not the subject of this video. I'm just letting you know why I look unshaven and unkempt. I've received some comments about that. So after Thursday is the 9th of the month of Av on the Jewish calendar. That's the anniversary of the destruction of the temple. And after that, I should be cleaned up and looking spiffy. Now, what we're going to talk about in this video is the American thinking, the strategy of the United States of America right now. What is President Trump thinking? What are the options in front of him? And how is he playing this? And we're going to look at this question through the lens of a video, of a clip by Victor Davis Hanson, the great Victor Davis Hanson. You're probably familiar with him. Certainly, if you watch this channel regularly, you know that I use clips of him fairly frequently and comment on them. He's a great mind, great military historian, an analyst. However, the reason I want to discuss this clip is I'm telling you ahead of time what we're going to see. In this clip, he is going to lay out the strategic calculations that are going on in the minds of President Trump, in the minds of the Americans, and what the various options are in front of them. This is what he's going to lay out. And everything he says is smart and accurate, and I think that it is a correct read of what the Americans are thinking. That said, everything he's going to lay out has this big blind spot. And I don't know if it's his blind spot or he's just reflecting the Americans' blind spot, but it has a blind spot. And the blind spot is the usual Western blind spot that leads to a prolonging of this whole situation, of this whole war, throwing a lifeline to the regime and all those things. So we're going to lay out what we see. Let's start with the first clip from Victor Davis Hanson. And this is going to be about 3 minutes long. And then I'll stop it and I'll have something to say, and then we'll go on. So here we go. Victor Davis Hanson.
Hello, this is Victor Davis Hanson for the Daily Signal. We're approaching 140 days since we first attacked Iran on February 28th of this year. And we only really had, people call this a war, but it's basically 40 days of actual bombing and tit for tat, followed by 100 days of negotiations interspliced with some tit for tat exchange of missiles and drones. But for the most part, we have negotiated. Now, we know the strategy of both sides. The strategy of our president was he wanted to stay in power, meaning he wanted to have control of the Congress. Otherwise, his initiatives and agenda will be ossified if the Democrats take over the House. They will impeach him if they take over the House. And he's protected against conviction by running the Senate. But if he should lose the House or Senate, in other words, if things would blow up, he would be in deep trouble. So his point was always to make sure that Iran did not have the ability to produce a nuclear weapon and did not have the ability to launch missiles all over the Gulf and did not have the ability to close the Straits of Hormuz. But the negotiations interrupted that cycle in which Iran also had a strategy. And their strategy was, if we can drag this conflict out and punctuate it with missile launches and write out the retaliations, which would be proportional or symmetric, we can run the clock out all the way to the midterms. If we do, the Democrats will take over the House of Representatives, and maybe they will not allot money to continue Trump's war. And more importantly, maybe this will be the start of a new government in 2028, and we'll be home free as we were with Biden and Obama. So that was their strategy, drag it out, drag it out. Who won? Well, we'll see about the denouement, but for now, Iran has been able to survive because we stopped full-scale fighting almost 100 days ago, and these tit-for-tats have been ineffectual in the sense they have not stopped the missile barrages to the Gulf states, and they have not given us control over the Strait of Hormuz, and we do not have control of the enriched uranium. So,
okay, let's pause there and talk about what he just said. So first of all, his comment about the Iranian strategy is spot on, and it's exactly what I wrote before the war began, 10 days before the war began. Jerusalem Post published a column that I wrote where I said exactly that. I said the Iranian strategy is to absorb the strikes of the United States, that they actually prefer. This was back when we were all wondering, why are they not giving in to Trump? Why are they not, all of this military buildup? They don't have a chance. Why are they not capitulating? And I said, they're not capitulating because they actually want to go to war. It's better for them than agreeing to a deal that ties their hands, because the Americans had laid out during that whole negotiation and arms buildup, the Americans had made these 4 demands that became the 4 war aims: to dismantle the ballistic missile threat, to stop the funding for the proxies. At the time, it was to stop human rights abuses, stop abusing their own people, and to surrender their ability to have a nuclear weapon. And from the Iranians' perspective, we'd rather go to war because they knew, or they felt that they have a better chance of the regime surviving, no matter how bad the damage is. And think about that in terms of where we are now. This is what I wrote then. No matter how bad the damage is, it could be terrible damage, but as long as they remain in power, then they could ride out the rest of the Trump administration and they'll be fine. And that's exactly where we are right now. And he said, he had a very important turn of phrase in there where he said that the Iranians, and he's not attributing that to the full war. What he's saying is that the original strikes, the original 40 days of striking, from February 28th to April 8th, that was, when that was happening, it's because we stopped that we are where we are now. But I don't think that's entirely true, because so long as the strikes were really about degrading their military, then that still is in the category of what I'm saying, of what I wrote about, that they could just ride it out and they could end up surviving and not be removed from power. What was happening at the end of that 40 days is what is so critical. And that's what stopped on April 8th, that gave a lifeline to the regime, is not the American bombing of military targets. What stopped on April 8th was the Israeli attacks on the IRGC, the besieged, the regime targets, the checkpoints. We started to see desertions. That's what stopped on April 8th. In any event, and that's already, I'm starting to, to tell you what the blind spot is in this whole thing. But nevertheless, that's what he says. So the Iranians' strategy was to just always, look to buy more time. And the American strategy, Trump is looking to make sure that he gets reelected in the midterms, which is true. And there's a lot to be said for that, because no matter how frustrated people on our side have been with the ceasefire and the MOU and how certain aspects of the war aims seem to have fallen by the wayside, we have to remember that if President Trump loses the midterm elections, he loses the House, loses the Senate, then we're in way worse shape. So if the calculation is correct that this is what he needs to do to win the midterms, we have to be behind that. Okay, let's just keep that in mind. Okay, let's watch a little bit more of this, and then I'll comment again. Okay, here we go.
So where are we now? We still have the same pressures on Donald Trump. We've got less than 4 months now until the midterms, but the economic news has been surprisingly good. Inflation at a per month rate is at a historical low almost. And unemployment is about 4.2. GDP is strong at 2.3, 2.4. Stock market is high. The full effect of tax cuts and greater energy production and deregulations are starting to be felt along with foreign investment. So Trump thinks that along with the redistricting and the Supreme Court ruling on gerrymandering, he might have a chance to upset the historical reality that 39 of the last 41 midterms have gone to the out party. So he still thinks he has a chance, and he still wants to conclude operations and go home, and the Iranians know that. So
Okay, so before we go on, let's talk about the economic side of this, because that's what he just laid out. He's like, hey, the economy is actually doing really well. So in terms of the midterms, Trump is confident that a lot of the indicators, the economic indicators, are so strong that he should be able to ride that to success in the midterms. I want to add in another ingredient here that has directly to do with this war, which is this. When the war began and there was this spike in oil prices, and that's what started causing, that was the main driver of the domestic discontent, the domestic criticism of what he was doing, or we should say the voter sentiment turning against the war that was causing Trump a problem. A plot line in the war of the need to get the oil prices down and the Strait of Hormuz and all that. That's when all that started happening. Now, what Trump kept saying all the way through, listen carefully, I think this is a huge point that people are missing. When Trump kept saying early on, when the prices were really going sky high, breaking 100 and well over 100, he kept saying, no worry, don't worry. As soon as this is over, they're going to come right back down. They're going to drop like a rock. Like, he kept saying that. He kept reminding everyone they're going to come way back down. They're going to cut down lower than before. Like, he was emphasizing that. And it was easy at the time to take that as kind of like, Trump saying, no problem. I got this under control. And like, is that part of the bluster? Is it just optimism? The fact that he was right, the fact that the prices did plummet during the ceasefire and come all the way down, and all the way down as low as they were before the war even began. What I believe is that if in this next phase of the war that we're in now, that could continue for a little while, that even if the prices go back up to where they were at the high point early in the war, it will, first of all, I don't think they will go that high, because most of that spike in prices was not because there was a lack of supply of oil. The oil that the world had at its disposal was fine. It all had to do with futures, with speculation, with where things are going. And that's why it was fluctuating so rapidly. I mean, the supply of oil doesn't fluctuate on a day-to-day basis that rapidly. That's what that was really about. So I believe that even if the prices do spike, at the level of the voters, of the consumer, even if they see that spike in prices again, when Trump messages this time, don't worry, the prices are going to come down as fast as they rose, and it's going to get down as low as it was before, there is now so much more confidence in Trump saying that. There's so much more faith that people will have in Trump when he says that, because they just experienced it a few weeks earlier, a month earlier, 2 months earlier, however long this goes on. So I think that's a very important part of what this piece of his argument here, that Trump feels that that he has some pretty solid indicators economically, and that people, there shouldn't, that he's actually in a stronger position. Now, it could be that Trump is already thinking about that, and that's why he is willing to be engaged kinetically to the extent that we are. But I just wanted to add that in here. Let's continue with Victor Davis Hanson.
Where are we now? I think we can see what he's doing. The last 4 days, he's had very, very strong strikes. Some of his critics have said on the right, well, you're hitting all of these dock works and these small mosquito fleet and the fuel for missiles. Why didn't we do that earlier? Well, we didn't do it earlier because we were negotiating and we were measured and proportionate. And to deal with the Iranians now, you have to be unmeasured and disproportionate. So what we are seeing now is a full-scale effort to destroy all of their military abilities. And that would mean going to the factories, the industrial complex that makes these missiles, find them where their launchers are, find their drone fields, clear the corridor near the strait of all of their anti-aircraft ability, their missiles, their drones, and their small fleet of vestigial boats that they use to mine the strait and attack tankers. Clear it all out. Do this for a week or 2 weeks, and then stop and see if they want to concede.
Okay. Now we've hit the big blind spot. He's saying that now Trump is hitting them really hard and he's really wiping out all their military capabilities. Look, wiping out their military capabilities from the air is not going to solve this. Let me say that again. Wiping out even all of their military capabilities from the air is not going to solve this. If these guys remain in power, you're not going to take away all the machine guns that the Basij and the IRGC have. Like, what does it mean to wipe out their military capabilities? It means missiles, drones, all the things he's describing, their ability to wage war, their ability to close the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, you could do that. You could do that. But that's just a more extreme version, a more severe version, I should say, of the same Band-Aid solutions that are not actually solving the problem. That's the blind spot here. And it's also very costly and time-consuming, and we're wiping out all the military capabilities. I made a video at the end of last week on Friday where I laid out 5 things that I think the U.S. should be doing or could be doing that would actually lead to a swifter victory and would not involve any boots on the ground. It would involve far less kinetic activity than is happening now, far less damage than is happening now, and could actually lead to victory. And all the suggestions I made, you should go watch that video. I also turned it into a column that's going to run in the Jerusalem Post this week, because I think it's very important. And what I was talking about in that piece, and you should go watch that video. Maybe I'll pin it in this one. I'll pin it in the comment in this video as soon as this one comes out. But what I was saying there is they want to survive as a regime. So even though you've intensified the strikes on all the military installations and all the military equipment and their ability to strike, that's not going to bring down the regime. And if you don't bring down the regime, I know everyone's like, oh, we don't want this to be regime change. Understand something. It's very nice to say, yeah, we don't want regime change because you're worried that it's going to be another Iraq or another Afghanistan or another Libya or whatever, chaos. But this is a totally different situation. If these people are not dislodged from power, they are single-minded. Haven't we seen enough in their behavior, how they behave towards their own people, how they behave when they're given any respite? Even during this respite where they were negotiating, what do we now find out? That they were actually going back to try to restart the program, the nuclear program. They were buying whatever money they got, whatever little bit of money they got while their economy's collapsing and everyone's starving. They used it to purchase airplanes from Russia. We saw all this. Why do you think this will end even if you destroy all of their military capabilities? But the IRGC and the Basij are still there, and these guys are still in power, and they're battered, terribly battered. And Trump says, look, they have no ability to have a nuclear weapon. We've destroyed their military. Everyone is safe. The Straits of Hormuz are open. None of their neighboring countries are threatened. Okay, so they wait it out. They're selling their oil. They're doing business through Pakistan to China to Russia. And what are they going to do with that money after Trump leaves office? What are they going to do? We'll be back to doing this is who they are. And therefore, what really needs to happen here is to think about what are the things that you can do that can actually destabilize the regime. Because believe it or not, bombing them to kingdom come is not destabilizing the regime. The economic warfare that's great. The economic warfare is actually more effective than the bombing, in my opinion, because that can actually lead to the regime to fall. That could lead the regime to fall. But you know what else will lead the regime to fall? Calling the people out to the streets, providing air cover for them, calling out the Iranians for Mojtaba Khamenei not actually being in charge and forcing them to verify that he's in charge, forcing their hand. Because what that will show the Iranian people, if they can't produce a living, breathing Mojtaba Khamenei, and suddenly there's a massive question out in public about whether or not he's actually alive, the way these people think, that will destabilize the regime. That's what they fear. They fear that more than they fear any bombing of any of their military installations. And this is the blind spot. So stop, so what is he saying here? So just let's hit more of their military sites and more of their military sites, and then we'll stop and see if they want to concede. Of course, they're not going to want to concede. Let's see where he goes from here.
If they do not want to concede, then I think you would have another week of dual-use targeting, and that would mean they were going to bring in the B-2s and hit Pickaxe Mountain, seal the areas under suspicion of harboring enriched uranium, hit the bridges, hit some of the power grid, and then go home and say to our allies, Iran is now mostly inert. They have no air force. You in the Gulf, you have 600 combat frontline aircraft. You have missiles, you have missile defense. You can defend yourself from an inert Iran. You Europeans, Japanese, South Koreans, Taiwanese, you all want to use the Strait. We don't. But we've cleaned it out now, and all you have to do is send a couple of vessels each. And under our leadership, we always have forces in the Persian Gulf. We have frigates. We have a carrier that rotates in and out. We will help you organize the ability and the willpower to keep the Strait open.
Now, I actually like this idea of, looking at the Saudis and the Emiratis and all of these guys and all of the other countries to the east and saying, look, and the Europeans, and say, listen, you have military capabilities. The fact that you never, ever, ever use them to defend yourselves and just wait for America to come in and defend you, that's a separate issue. But if you can degrade Iran's military to dust and then say to them, listen, it's not even just how wimpy can you be? You have airplanes, you have capabilities, come on in here and defend the Strait of Hormuz. Not a bad idea, but still, think of what I was saying before. It's still a Band-Aid solution. It's still, short term. What does short term mean? Could it take 10 years for them to start rebuilding? How long does it take for them to start refunding their proxies? How long does it take for them? Who knows what they have, underground that we're not going to have located? How long is it going to take for them to get more equipment from the Russians and the Chinese? It just kicks the can down the road. It doesn't dislodge the regime from power. And that means 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now. Is there we're going to wait for another Trump to come along to try to dislodge them from power? Are we dooming the world to have the Iranian regime in perpetuity? This is my problem with this whole American approach, which is that it's about getting the straits opened and degrading them and making sure that that Shiite 12er apocalyptic genocidal regime, if we can degrade their military capabilities, we solve the problem that regime poses to the world. No, we have not. No, we have not. All right, let's keep going. We'll finish up.
And it's not going to be difficult because Iran has suffered enormous damage, and that would be in 2 or 3 weeks. In other words, then he could pivot and say that Iran is now militarily and nuclearly inert, and we are back home, and our allies are taking part of the burden, and they're keeping the Strait open. There's one final wild card. Notice something very unusual. Iran boasts almost every day that it is hitting Oman, the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. The Houthis have even sent missiles into Saudi Arabia. These are Muslim nations fighting Muslim nation. Iran fighting fellow Muslim nations. A Persian Muslim country fighting Arab Muslim countries. What is Iran not doing? It's not attacking Israel. It's not attacking Israel. Why?
Bingo. Bingo. Okay, what's his explanation? Why isn't it attacking Israel?
Isn't it attacking Israel? Because they know, in addition to the American effort, if they were to attack Israel, Israel has rested for the last 4.5 months. They've restocked their munitions. They've got superior intelligence. They're infiltrated into the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Islamic Guard Corps. They're infiltrated into the military. They know where these people live. They know where they work. They know how they travel. And they've been warned that if they hit Israel, they're going to go after the 4th, 5th, and 6th tier leadership, and they're providing intelligence to the Americans. So for now, seems unbelievable, the Iranians would rather attack other Muslim countries across the Gulf than tangle with their supposed little Satan, their existential enemy, Israel. Why? Because Israel has obtained overwhelming deterrence. And
okay, let's let him finish.
They're afraid that if Israel gets in the fray along with the United States, that they will suffer inordinately and may not recover.
It's amazing. He's dancing around saying the thing without saying the thing. Let's be much more precise. Israel has a plan to take down the regime. As I pointed out, from mid-March until April 8th, in that original bombing campaign that began this war, after the first couple of weeks, Israel turned its attention to degrading the besieged and the IRGC. More targeted killings, more hitting the checkpoints, hitting the headquarters, hitting the training bases of the IRGC. We started to see desertions. We were reporting on it at the time. Israel has a plan. I made another video about this last week where I brought a video from General Amir Avivi talking about how Israel has definitive plans of how to actually destabilize and bring down the regime. Back then, during that fighting, I remember Israel's defense minister saying that when the time comes and the Iranian people are called back into the street, we will provide drone cover from the air for them. Israel knows how to bring down the regime. And that's what instead of saying, oh, it's going to be, they're going to suffer more if they attack Israel. It's not just how much their military will be degraded or the bombing that they're experiencing now will get worse. It's different. It's not just a different scale. It's of a different nature. Israel's entering into the war would mean that the regime would actually be in danger of being taken down because they know that whatever Trump is doing, Trump is dancing between the raindrops. He's hitting them hard, but he's not doing the things you need to do to actually take the regime down. That's the miss. So here's what I argue. Doing it the way he recommends, let's hit them really hard. And then if they don't concede, we'll hit them really hard some more. And we'll degrade them so much that we can walk away and say, look, they're totally degraded. And leave it to the locals, to control things and to defend. In theory, that's a nice idea. But it will mean that they will still be in power. And it will mean that, they'll start out weak. And that could take 10 years or 15 years or 20 years or 40 years. These are patient people. They don't think in terms of 4-year election cycles. They know that they're facing an existential threat. There's only one Donald Trump. They know that they didn't have one for the last 47 years, and they don't expect another one to come after him. So they just know this happens to be an existential problem for them, for their regime. But if they can weather the storm and they can stay in power till it's over, they will rebuild. And that's the blind spot. Even the great Victor Davis Hanson, they're missing it. What the Americans are doing is not effective. I'm talking about the bombing. The economic stuff is very effective. Very effective. And that could actually bring the regime down. So I'm not saying Trump's not trying to bring down the regime. I'm saying if the calculation is what Victor Davis Hanson is saying, then it's missing a big piece. It's missing the piece of the actions that could be taken. And here's the sad part. Like I said in that video I made last week, this war could be over quicker with less damage if they took my advice. If you start thinking, instead of thinking in terms of opening the Strait of Hormuz, which you're struggling to get open, and no one's about to sail a ship through there with everyone firing back and forth. All this is going on. Think about bringing down the regime, and then the Strait of Hormuz is open. The regime falls, the Strait of Hormuz is open. If the regime falls, there's no proxy network anymore. If the regime falls, there's no problem of ballistic missiles or nuclear. These problems just vanish if the regime falls. And that's what you need to do. Much quicker, much less bloody, much less expensive. But it requires a change in thinking about what the objectives are here. Now, before I say goodbye to you, tomorrow is the big day. We're having our webinar. Are we headed for regime change? Israel 365 Action presents. Are we headed for regime change? What to expect from the Middle East? With an amazing all-star cast of world-class experts. Brigadier General Amir Avivi, who I mentioned before from the Israel Defense and Security Forum. Brian Kennedy, senior fellow and former president of the Claremont Institute, Dr. David Wormser of the Center for Security Policy, and Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricas of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, former IDF spokesman, are all going to be joining us in the webinar tomorrow. Register for this webinar in the link in the description of this video, Israel365.com/regime, or scan this QR code and you could be registered and you'll get the video. And even if you can't make the webinar live at 1 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, 8 p.m. in Israel, if you're registered, you will receive a link to watch the full webinar after it airs. So make sure not to miss that. And with that, I will sign off. Thank you for watching. And yeah, we're at a critical juncture in the war. I don't want to sound too negative here. I'm not saying that the Americans are screwing this up. Don't misunderstand me. What they're doing economically, to me, right now is the main thing. The main event, the sound and light show, the fireworks show, is the bombing, for sure. That's what everyone's reporting on. But I'm telling you, and I've made a few videos over the last week or so about this stuff, the sanctions and what Scott Bessent is doing and how the economy in Iran is doing. Go back and find those videos. That's the main thing right now, because that actually has a chance to collapse the regime. And the regime can be collapsed without boots on the ground, without taking Karg Island, without any of this. And that's what America needs to drive towards, in my opinion. I'm going to keep saying this. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself these days, but we're at a critical juncture in this war. And I think that it's within reach. And we're also starting to hear reports now that there's some uprisings starting to stir, that there were some protests in Tehran last week, starting small. We'll see where it goes. All right, folks, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for watching. And please like, share, subscribe. And when I say, please share, it really helps. Just pick one person who you think might find this interesting. Send it to them. It really does a great deal to help grow the channel. And I'm so grateful to all of you for everything that's happened on this channel since we started it back in January. It's been unbelievable. We started this channel in January, and we're up to 85,000 subscribers. And that really shows that there's an audience here. And I'm grateful to all of you. Thank you. God bless.